There were 5 nail holes in his hands. Not driven through the palms like the pictures in Sunday school. Driven through the wrists. And the nails were still warm. This is case file 101. The Myrtles Plantation. Street. Francisville, Louisiana. The archive does not explain. It only records. It recorded the temperature in the south parlor, dropping to 39 degrees on an August afternoon with no air conditioning. It recorded the sound of a woman weeping from behind a wall that has no room behind it. It recorded 17 unmarked graves beneath the oak tree, all leaning toward the house as if reaching for something. Once a case file is opened, it cannot be closed. Once a name is recorded, it cannot be forgotten. The wall is still there. The weeping has never stopped. Do you want to know why? Viewer discretion is advised. The following account contains descriptions that may disturb some audiences. Before the first brick was laid in St. Francisville, the ground was already hungry. In 1756, a family named Devereaux built a cabin in a clearing. They were farmers. They were quiet. They kept to themselves. One winter morning, a neighbor came to trade salt for cornmeal and found the fire still burning. The table still set. A child's doll lying face down in the yard, its cloth arms spread wide, its blank face pressed into the mud. No bodies. No tracks leading away. The search party dug for 3 days. They found nothing but soil that felt wrong in their hands, cold, greasy, shifting as if something beneath it was breathing. 3 months later, a circuit preacher passed through and wrote in his journal, "Stopped at the Devereaux place today. Empty." The ground has a strange feel to it, as if it remembers something it cannot forget. The locals will not go near it. They say the Devereaux are not dead, merely waiting. I do not know what that means. I do not wish to find out. The Devereaux had no living heirs. But the hunger they left behind was hungry for heirs. When General David Bradford bought the land in 1796 and built his house upon it, the hunger seeped into the timber. It curled into the mortar. It whispered into the silence where family prayers should have been. And it waited. By 1820, the house belonged to Clark Woodruff, a lawyer who brought his young wife Sarah to the plantation on a spring morning. She was beautiful. She was 17. By winter, she was dead. The doctors called it yellow fever. But the mirrors in that house tell a different story. One written in handprints that won't wash away, in cold spots that move from room to room no matter the season. Sarah Woodruff died with a wound in her chest that no doctor could see. She died of a hunger that had crawled into her the moment she crossed the threshold. She was the first. She was not the last. For a century, the house changed hands, but the hunger remained constant, waiting for a family arrogant enough to ignore the silence. In 1952, the Graysons arrived. William Grayson was a businessman from Baton Rouge. He bought the Myrtles Plantation at auction for a price so low the auctioneer refused to look him in the eye. William did not ask questions. He had made his fortune by not asking questions. He had 2 brothers. Harold, the older, who never married, a man with eyes that seemed to watch something just behind you. Paul, the younger, who had a wife and children and a nervous habit of sweating in cold rooms. William himself had 5 sons. The ones who matter are James, the eldest, Thomas, the middle, and Samuel, the youngest, 19, just returned from his first year at Louisiana State, still young enough to believe the world operated by rules he understood. The family business was timber and shipping. They needed storage space. The plantation house was not just a home. It was an asset. The trouble began when James decided to expand the ground floor. The house had a wall in the south parlor that served no structural purpose. It was simply there, plastered and painted, blocking off what should have been additional square footage. James tapped the wall with a hammer and heard a hollow sound behind it. When Harold and Paul learned of the plan, they drove from town in a fury. Harold grabbed James by the arm. His grip was cold. His voice was colder. "You will not touch that wall. Do you understand? You will not touch it." James was 43 years old. He had not been spoken to like that since childhood. He asked what was behind the wall. Harold did not answer. Paul stood by the window, staring at the oak trees, sweat running down his face though it was February and 40 degrees outside. "There are other walls," Paul said. "There are other rooms. Use those," but James had his father's stubbornness. The next morning, when his uncles were attending business in Baton Rouge, he brought 3 men with sledgehammers to the south parlor. They swung. The plaster cracked. The lath splintered. And behind the wall, they found a door. It was made of cypress wood, so old it had turned the color of dried blood. It had no handle on their side. It swung outward. And it was locked, not with a modern lock, but with a bolt driven deep into the frame. Wrapped around that bolt was a chain. Fixed to that chain was a crucifix made of iron, hung upside down. James Grayson removed the crucifix. He broke the bolt. He opened the door. The room behind the wall was small, 8 feet by 8 feet. It had no windows. The floor was dirt, not wood. The air that rolled out of that room was not cold. It was hungry. It pressed against their faces like a blind mouth searching for something to swallow. In the center of the dirt floor sat a chest. Oak, bound with iron bands. On its lid, someone had carved words deep into the wood. The letters were jagged, cut by a hand that had been shaking. "Let no man open this. What is bound here must remain bound. Pray for the souls of the Devereaux family. Pray for the soul of Sarah Woodruff. Pray for your own." Beneath the words was a date, April 14, 1868. James opened the chest. Inside, a Bible, King James, its pages marked with notations in handwriting that slanted violently to the left. A rosary with beads made of something that was not wood, something that felt warm to the touch. 2 small funerary urns sealed with black wax. And beneath the urns, wrapped in a cloth that crumbled at his touch, a doll. The doll was made of cloth and straw, and something that might have been hair. It had no face, only a smooth surface where a face should have been, stained dark. Driven through its chest was a nail. Not a modern nail. A square nail, hand-forged, rusted but still sharp. A nail meant for a coffin. Samuel, the youngest, the one who still believed in rules, reached into the chest and pulled the nail from the doll. The moment the nail came free, the darkness in that room changed. It did not deepen. It thickened. It became a presence. Every man in that room felt the temperature drop, not by degrees but by decades. James later said his breath fogged in front of his face. One of the workers vomited. Another began to cry, without knowing why. Samuel said nothing. He was staring at the doll, at the place where the nail had been, at the dark stain spreading outward from that hole, spreading though nothing wet touched his fingers, spreading like a bruise across the cloth, spreading like something waking up. James didn't know it yet, but the 17th grave beneath the oak tree wasn't waiting for a Devereaux. It was waiting for a Grayson. Harold and Paul arrived an hour later. When they saw the broken wall, the open door, the chest on the dirt floor, Harold sat down heavily in the nearest chair. His face was the color of old paper. Paul began to weep, Not cry, weep the way someone weeps at a grave. "You have killed us," Harold said. "You have killed us all." That night, Samuel Grayson woke at 3:17 a.m. There was a pressure on his chest. 5 distinct points. 4 fingers and a thumb. Pressing down. Pushing him into the mattress. He could not move. He could not scream. He could only watch as the darkness in the corner of his bedroom, a darkness darker than darkness should be, began to move. It detached from the wall. It took shape. A voice whispered from inside that shape. A woman's voice. Young. Broken. Hungry. "You pulled it out. Now you will put it back." In the morning, there were scratches on Samuel's back. 3 parallel lines, running from his left shoulder blade to his right hip. The skin around them was cold to the touch. It has never warmed since. 4 nights later, Samuel volunteered to stay late at the plantation house. The accounts needed balancing. He told his brothers he would sleep in the office and finish the books. His uncles begged him not to stay. Paul grabbed his nephew's shoulders. His hands were shaking. Night belongs to the family. Work in the day. Tomorrow will come. Samuel shook him off. He worked until midnight. The oil lamp flickered. He heard breathing behind him. He turned. No one was there. He turned back to the books. A hand touched his shoulder, not a hand of flesh, but a hand of cold, a hand that passed through his shirt and into his skin and touched something inside him that had never been touched before. He spun around. The room was empty. He went to the kitchen for water. Through the window, he saw the old oak tree in the courtyard. A branch as thick as a man's thigh had fallen. There had been no wind. At the base of the tree, the ground had split open. A crack 2 feet wide. Black inside. Breathing. He returned to the south parlor. The door to the hidden room was open. He had not left it open. The chest was on its side. The urns had shattered. The ashes were scattered across the dirt floor in a pattern, a spiral winding inward to a center point where the faceless doll sat upright, facing the door, waiting. Samuel knelt to gather the ashes. The lamp went out. In the absolute darkness, something knelt beside him. Something that had been waiting since 1756. Something that had absorbed Sarah Woodruff's grief and the Devereaux family's terror and decades of prayers said backward. It spoke into his ear. Its breath was cold. Its voice was not a voice but the memory of a voice, layered, many speaking as one. This is only the beginning. Now you will see what comes next. The lamp relit on its own. And on the wall, Samuel saw a shadow. A shadow that did not belong to him. A shadow that was too tall, too thin, too wrong in the angles of its arms. He watched the shadow raise one hand. He felt the blow across his face. He fell. He did not rise. The next morning, the workers found Samuel unconscious on the floor of the hidden room. There were nails driven into his hands. Not through the palms. Through the wrists. 4 on the right. 4 on the left. The flesh around each wound was not torn. It was smooth, as if the nails had been inserted with surgical precision, as if the skin had parted willingly to accept them. And in the center of his chest, just above the heart, a single square nail. The one he had pulled from the doll. It had been driven in so deeply that only the head was visible. The head was warm to the touch. They took Samuel to the hospital in Baton Rouge. The doctors removed the nails. The sound they made coming out, a wet, sucking sound, like mud releasing something it had swallowed, stayed in the operating room for hours after the surgery ended. Samuel did not regain consciousness for 3 days. When he woke, he spoke without opening his eyes. "You did not have to suffer," he said. His voice was calm. His lips barely moved. "But you touched what was not yours. These nails are your education. Now you understand that the dead do not give up their belongings easily." It was not Samuel speaking. The 5 brothers refused to leave. James, still bandaged, told his uncles it was a business rival. Sabotage. "We'll find who did this." 13 days after Samuel's hospitalization, Harold Grayson walked to the plantation house alone. He was found the next morning hanging from the oak tree in the courtyard. His pants were missing. The rope was made from his own belt. His wrists had been cut, not deeply enough to kill, but deeply enough to bleed. The coroner said he had been beaten before death. The police said no weapon was found. What they did not say, what they could not explain, was the writing. Someone had carved words into the bark of the oak tree above Harold's body. The same jagged letters. The same shaking hand. "The hunger remains." Paul, the last uncle, came to his nephews after the funeral. He did not speak at the graveside. But that night, he sat them down in the kitchen. He did not give a long speech. He simply placed a scorched leather journal on the table, pages singed at the edges, handwriting slanted violently to the left, and a photograph taken in 1868. The photograph showed the same oak tree, the same branch, and hanging from it, a figure in period clothing, eyes open, mouth open. Carved into the bark above the body, the same words Paul's nephews had seen 2 days earlier. Then Paul told them what the journal contained. In 1868, a man named Ezekiel Devereaux came to the Myrtles Plantation. He was the last living descendant of the family that had vanished on that land. He had spent his life researching what had happened to them. He had learned that the hunger in the ground was older than his ancestors, older than the colony, older than any name that could be spoken. He had come to bind it. The Sterling family, who owned the plantation then, did not want anyone meddling with their property. They killed Ezekiel. They killed his wife. They staged it as a suicide pact and buried them in unmarked graves beneath the oak tree. They burned his research. But they kept the one thing Ezekiel had brought with him, the chest, the doll, the nails. Within a month, the eldest Sterling son was found hanging from the same oak tree. His eyes were open. His mouth was open. And carved into the bark above him were the words, "The hunger remains." The Sterlings hired a preacher who had studied things the church preferred to forget. He performed a binding. He sealed Ezekiel's spirit and his wife's spirit and the older hunger they had disturbed into that doll. He drove the nail through its chest. He locked it in the hidden room. He bricked up the door. He warned them, this room must never be opened. If you love your children, if you love your children's children, you will leave this house to rot before you open this door. The Sterlings died out within 2 generations. And the Graysons had opened the door. Paul told them one final thing, the reason William, their father, had bought the plantation so cheaply. William had known. He had heard the rumors from the last Sterling descendants. He had dismissed them. But when he learned the full truth, the fear stopped his heart. He was 56. He died of nothing the doctors could name. The hunger had already begun to feed. The brothers brought in a minister, not a parish priest, a man who had seen possession in the Bayou parishes, who had been called to houses where the walls bled and the mirrors showed faces that were not yours. His name was Reverend Thomas Morrow. He was 78 years old. He had the eyes of someone who had looked into the abyss and found the abyss looking back. He sat in the south parlor. He placed his worn Bible on his lap. He did not open it. The oil lamp on the table beside him flickered once, twice, then steadied. The flame bent sideways, as if someone had breathed on it from inches away, though no one stood near it. "Who are you?" he asked the room. The air thickened. The temperature dropped. And from the hidden room behind the wall, a voice answered. It was not one voice. It was many, layered over each other like wet leaves. "You know who I am. I know who you were. I want to know who you are now. I am what is left. I am what waits. I am what hungers. For what? Silence." Then the voice cracked. The layers fell away. And for one moment it was only one voice, a woman's voice, young and broken, raw with 2 centuries of unshed tears. "I gave them everything. I buried them one by one. My husband, my sons, my daughters. And when I lay down in my own grave, I expected rest. I expected the arms of Jesus." The voice splintered again, becoming many, but the grief remained. There was nothing. Only dark. Only cold. Only the sound of children laughing above me. Children who had what was taken from me. Children who grew old and died, and were buried above me while I waited. "I am still waiting." Reverend Morrow leaned forward. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sarah Woodruff. Ezekiel Devereaux. All of you who have been swallowed by this ground. You are not forgotten. You are not abandoned. But you cannot stay here. This family is not your family. In the name of Jesus Christ, who died for you, who rose for you, who waits for you, I command you to let go." "I cannot." "You can. Let go." The scream that followed was not a sound of anger. It was a sound of grief. A wound that had festered for 200 years, feeding on older hungers. The scream went on for 47 seconds. 1 second for every year the thing had been bound. The chandelier in the main hall swung without wind. The mirrors in the upstairs bedrooms cracked from edge to edge. Every door in the house slammed open at once. And then silence. Samuel opened his eyes. His eyes were his own. "What happened?" he asked. For 3 days, everything was normal. The brothers began to believe it was over. On the 4th night, Samuel woke at 3:17 a.m. He got dressed. He walked out of the house. He walked through the empty streets of St. Francisville, past the shuttered stores and the dark houses, past the church where Reverend Morrow slept. He walked to the Myrtles Plantation. He climbed the gate. He crossed the courtyard. He walked to the oak tree. Thomas had been unable to sleep. He had followed his brother at a distance. He watched Samuel stop beneath the oak tree and stand perfectly still, staring up at the branches where Harold had hung. "Samuel?" Samuel turned. His face was his own. His eyes were clear. But his smile was wrong. It was the smile of someone who had been somewhere Thomas would never go until it was too late. "Thomas?" Samuel said. His voice was his voice. His real voice. "Did you know that when you die, you don't stop wanting?" "Samuel, let's go home." "I am home." Samuel gestured at the ground beneath the oak tree. The crack in the earth had widened. It was breathing. "They're all home. The Devereaux. Sarah Woodruff. Ezekiel and his wife. They're not angry, Thomas. They're just empty. And emptiness has to fill itself somehow. It reaches out. It finds cracks. It seeps into anything that's hollow." He looked at his brother. And for a moment, he was just a boy. 19 years old. Scared. It wasn't a demon, Thomas. It wasn't a ghost. It was a hunger. A hunger that started somewhere else. Somewhere so old that the Devereaux didn't even know what they were bringing with them when they built their cabin. And it's been feeding ever since. on grief, on loneliness, on the space between what we wanted and what we got. He looked down at his hands, at the scars on his wrists, 8 of them, still cold to the touch. Reverend Morrow's prayer worked, for a little while. But prayers don't fill emptiness. They just hold it back. And the emptiness is patient. It will wait until you're tired, until you're old, until you lie down in your own grave and wake up wanting. Thomas drove him home. That was the last time anyone saw Samuel Grayson smile. Samuel lives in Texas now. A 1-bedroom apartment with no windows facing any other building. The lights stay on. The door stays locked. But he still wakes at 3:17 a.m. He still feels the cold pressing against his chest like a hand. 5 points of contact. 4 fingers and a thumb. The pressure never changes. James Grayson retired early. The cold followed him. It lives in the corner of every room he enters. He has learned that some things cannot be outrun. Thomas and his wife left Louisiana. They moved to Oregon, to a town where it rains 300 days a year. Their daughter was born healthy. But sometimes, in the nursery, the temperature drops to 39 degrees. Sometimes the baby laughs at something in the corner that no one else can see. Sometimes she speaks a word she should not know, a name repeated in the dark in a voice that is not quite her own. Sarah and the Myrtles Plantation? It became a bed and breakfast. Tourists come now, taking photographs of the oak tree, walking the south parlor, laughing and living their small lives above something that is still waiting. The hidden room was sealed again. The door is behind fresh drywall. The chest is still inside. The doll is still inside. The nail was put back. But bindings weaken. Faith erodes. And hunger does not die. It only waits for the next door to open. If you ever visit the Myrtles Plantation and you feel the temperature drop for no reason, leave. If you ever feel a hand on your chest and you cannot see who it belongs to, pray. If you ever hear a woman weeping from behind a wall where no room exists, do not knock. Do not investigate. Do not ask who she is. She has already told you. This is Case File 101. The Myrtles Plantation. Street, Francisville, Louisiana. The south parlor wall is intact. The oak tree still stands. The 17 unmarked graves beneath it are still there, leaning toward the house as if reaching for something. The hunger was never destroyed. It was only bound. And bindings, like faith, can weaken over time. If you have a story that haunts you, send it to contact.thedreadcodex@gmail.com. Your truth becomes our tale. Your warning becomes our archive. Until next time, may your walls stay sealed. May your floors stay steady. May you never open a door that was meant to stay closed. And if you ever wake at 3:17 in the morning with a pressure on your chest, 5 points, 4 fingers and a thumb, do not open your eyes. It does not like to be seen. Good night.